The air inside Hangar 17 was thick and heavy, laden with the ghosts of forgotten journeys. For decades, it had stood at the edge of the old Al-Zarqa airfield, a place the desert was slowly but surely reclaiming. Sunlight struggled through grimy, cracked panes of glass high in the arched ceiling, illuminating dancing columns of dust. It smelled of decay, cold metal, and time itself. This was exactly the kind of place that drew in people like Marcus Vance, a freelance photojournalist with a passion for industrial ruins. He wasn't looking for treasure. He was hunting for stories trapped in rust and concrete. On this particular Tuesday, he'd managed to convince the airfield's elderly caretaker to let him have a look around, a permission granted with a shrug and a warning about bad floors and worse memories. Hangar 17 was the last on his list. Its colossal sliding doors were rusted shut, but a smaller, man-sized door in its side yielded with a groan of tortured metal. Marcus stepped inside, his camera ready. The space was cavernous, and for a moment, he thought it was empty. Then, as his eyes adjusted to the gloom, he saw it. It wasn't a wreck. It wasn't a collection of parts. It was a whole, intact cargo plane, a quad-engine turboprop behemoth that filled the hangar from wall to wall. Its dull, unmarked gray fuselage seemed to absorb the weak light, giving it a spectral, almost unreal quality. The tires, though coated in a thick layer of dust, were fully inflated. The propellers were poised, as if ready to spin to life. It looked less abandoned and more paused, as if the crew had simply stepped out for a coffee and never returned. Marcus slowly walked the length of the aircraft, his footsteps echoing in the profound silence. He was no aviation expert, but he knew one thing. Every plane has an identity. A tail number, an airline livery, a national flag. This one had nothing. Its skin was a sterile, anonymous gray. There were no logos, no call signs, no registration marks painted on the tail or fuselage. It was a blank slate, a ghost. He peered into the cockpit window. The flight deck was pristine, albeit dusty. No logbooks on the seats, no stray papers. In the cargo bay, which he accessed through an unlocked ramp, he found nothing. It was cavernous and empty, swept clean. This machine, a marvel of engineering worth millions, was sitting in a derelict hangar, belonging to no one, registered in no country, with a history that had been deliberately and meticulously erased. It was more than just an old plane. It was a riddle cast in aluminum and steel. And the first question wasn't who did it belong to, but a far more fundamental one. How is this even possible? To understand why the discovery sent quiet shockwaves through the aviation community, you have to understand one fundamental principle. In the modern world, there is no such thing as an anonymous airplane. This system is largely invisible to the public, yet it's one of the most robust and strictly enforced regulatory frameworks on the planet. Every single civilian aircraft, from a tiny two-seater Cessna to the largest Airbus, must be registered in a specific country. This isn't a suggestion, it's a non-negotiable law managed internationally by the ICAO, a specialized agency of the United Nations. This registration gives the aircraft its primary identity, the tail number. You've seen them, the N on an American plane, the G- on a British one, or the D- on a German one. This alphanumeric code is the plane's name, passport, and social security number rolled into one. It links the physical machine to a legal owner, a maintenance history, and a country that is legally responsible for its safe operation. Without this registration, a plane is a legal phantom. It has no right to fly, no certified safety record, and no one to answer for it. So, the gray giant in Hangar 17 wasn't just undocumented. It was an impossibility, a direct contradiction to the entire architecture of modern aviation safety and security. Its existence implied a deliberate and incredibly sophisticated effort to operate completely off the grid. Such a plane could cross borders without a trace, transport any cargo without scrutiny, and vanish without a whisper. It's the ultimate tool for anyone who needs to move things the world isn't supposed to see. A silent, gray machine in a dusty hangar might seem like a dead end, but to a trained investigator, it's a treasure trove of clues. Within days, a small, discreet team was assembled. An aviation forensic specialist, a veteran mechanic who knew Soviet-era hardware, and Marcus Vance, who had become the unofficial chronicler of the mystery. Their task was to make the silent witness talk. The first identification was swift. The aircraft was an Antonov An-12, a legendary workhorse of the Soviet military and civilian air fleets. Known for its ruggedness and ability to operate from unpaved, primitive airstrips, the An-12 was the airborne equivalent of a Kalashnikov rifle. Simple, reliable, and found everywhere. The investigation began with the paint. The sterile gray was thick and professionally applied, but under a microscopic analysis, it told a story. Faint traces of chemical residue suggested that a previous livery had been chemically stripped away, not just painted over. This was an expensive, time-consuming process. Inside, the clues became more specific. The cockpit was a paradox. The main instrument panels were filled with gauges and placards in their original Cyrillic script. But crudely bolted onto the console was a modern, aftermarket GPS system, the kind you could buy online. The most telling detail was a small, faded sticker on the co-pilot sun visor for a brand of cigarettes sold almost exclusively in the Balkans. The cavernous cargo bay, while swept clean, couldn't hide its secret from forensic scrutiny. The team took dozens of dust and residue samples. The lab results that came back weeks later were baffling. They found microscopic traces of soil consistent with Central Africa's Great Rift Valley. They also found minute metallic particles of coltan, a conflict mineral essential for modern electronics. And, oddly, they found traces of organic pollen from a species of orchid native only to a specific region of the Amazon basin in Colombia. This plane hadn't just been in one shady corner of the world. It had been in several. But the real breakthrough came from the place a ghostmaker would be most likely to forget. While the primary airframe identification plate had, as expected, been removed, a deep inspection of the No. 3 engine required the team to use a borescope to peer inside its complex machinery. And there, etched onto a turbine blade deep within the engine's core, was a part number and a serial number. It was a long shot, but it was the first solid thread they had. For the first time, the Phantom had a name, even if it was just a string of numbers on a tiny piece of metal. The paper trail could now begin. Having a serial number from a single turbine blade is like finding a single, unlabeled key to an unknown lock. The team's focus shifted from the dusty hangar to the labyrinthine world of international aviation records. After weeks of dead ends, a breakthrough came. A senior engineer at the Ivchenko Progress Design Bureau in Ukraine located the original production log. The engine had been manufactured in 1978 and installed on an Antonov An-12 with a specific airframe number delivered to the Soviet Air Force. For a moment, it felt like victory, but the trail quickly grew cold again. With the collapse of the Soviet Union, the regiment was disbanded. Official records from the Russian Ministry of Defense showed the aircraft in question was decommissioned in 1994 and officially struck from the register, slated to be scrapped. As far as the official paper trail was concerned, this plane had been melted down over 2 decades ago. This is where the real investigation began. The team scoured the shadowy, semi-legal world of aviation registries and so-called flags of convenience. And there it was. In 1996, an An-12 with the same airframe number briefly appeared on the civil registry of Liberia. 6 months later, it was deregistered. It reappeared in 1998 on the registry of Equatorial Guinea. It was a classic shell game. The trail hopped from Africa to a Caribbean P.O. box, then to a company in the UAE that existed only as a name on a brass plate. Each transfer was designed to make tracing its real ownership progressively more difficult. The last documented owner, a company registered in Cyprus around 2002, was the final dead end. The company was dissolved in 2004, its records legally destroyed. After that, the plane ceased to exist on paper. Someone had spent a great deal of money and effort not just to hide the plane, but to erase its very history. The question was no longer who owned it, but why they needed this level of absolute secrecy. When the paper trail dies, a new kind of map must be drawn, one based on evidence, logic, and the dark realities of our world. The In-12 in Hangar 17 was no longer just a plane. It was a ghost shaped by the secrets it once carried. The most straightforward explanation is that it was an elite smuggler's ghost. The In-12 is a smuggler's dream, and the forensic evidence paints a vivid picture. Coltan from Africa, pollen from Colombia. This was the private courier service for a cartel or a syndicate operating at the highest level. The plane's Soviet origins also point directly to another lucrative, clandestine market: weapons. Figures like the infamous arms dealer Victor Bout built entire empires using fleets of such ghost aircraft to fly weapons, ammunition, and military hardware into war zones and to nations under strict international arms embargoes. An unregistered In-12 is the perfect vehicle for this, allowing a nation to arm an ally while maintaining plausible deniability. But the most chilling and, in many ways, the most plausible theory is that it was the deniable asset of a government agency. The sheer clinical precision of this plane's erasure hints at a different level of resources and discipline. In the world of espionage, such an aircraft is used for black operations, secretly ferrying special forces teams, evacuating agents, or conducting extraordinary renditions. Its complete lack of identifying marks is its most critical feature. If it were ever forced down or photographed, the government that owned it could plausibly deny any connection. Its abandonment could mean the program it served was terminated or the aircraft itself was somehow compromised, making a liability. In that case, the protocol is simple: fly it to a quiet, out-of-the-way location and simply walk away. In the end, the ghost of Hangar 17 never gave up its deepest secrets. What became of the aircraft? For months, it sat in its dusty tomb, without a registered owner to claim it or an official record to condemn it. The In-12 was a legal paradox. Ultimately, the government of the country where it was found, citing aviation safety regulations, made a decision. The machine was carefully dismantled, its parts cataloged and placed in storage, a bureaucratic end to a dramatic mystery. But the story of the ghost plane doesn't end with its disassembly. It ends with the questions it leaves behind, hanging in the air like the dust in that long-abandoned hangar. Its discovery serves as a stark reminder. We live in an age of total surveillance, where we believe everything is known, cataloged, and accounted for. Yet this single machine proved that with enough resources, will, and desperation, it's still possible to vanish from the grid. It makes one wonder, how many other ghosts are out there? How many unmarked planes are currently soaring through the night sky on missions we will never know about? Their holds filled with cargo that could change the course of a small war, fund a criminal empire, or decide the fate of an individual. We will never have the full story of the plane from Hangar 17. Its true history was successfully erased, but its legacy is the unsettling knowledge that the world is not as orderly as we think. Up in the vast, dark sky, there are still secrets, and some of them have wings.